Hello, it's time for Combat Patrol Carnage. We're back with issue 19 and it's lore time. So we have one piece of lore about the Great Crusade and we have two short stories. There's going to be a little bit of a rating warning. One of the stories is a little kind of graphic, so if you are easily disturbed, don't listen to story one. That's all I can say. But yeah, it's a really nice story. It shows the grim dark of the grim dark. Really cool. And yet we have Bonds of Honor Part 5 as well, which sees I think it's the conclusion of Sergeant Askerton's story. But yeah, we've got plenty more Silver Templar stuff to come in future issues though. Before we hit the table, don't forget to do all the usual. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop me a comment down below. Doing those three things helps content creators know that they are appreciated and know what to bring you in the future. Continuing to like the Combat Patrol Carnage stuff helps me to know that you guys are enjoying Combat Patrol Carnage and want to see more of it. Liking my other videos lets me know that you like those particular game systems and types of videos, and I'll definitely try and do more of those. So if there's anything you're wanting to see, drop a comment down below and we'll have a good conversation. Finally, Combat Patrol Carnage is proudly sponsored by warbay.shop, your one-stop supply for all your hobby needs. They stock everything from new and used models for various different armies and game systems, to your hobby supplies, your gaming equipment, and they even stock Combat Patrol from Hachette. So if you want pre-orders, they're taking orders up to issue 30 at the moment, so check the link in the video description, check the other items and the Hachette Partworks tab to find Combat Patrol and other previous Hachette Partworks that you might want to pick up some older copies of. Right then, that said, let's head to the table and let's dive into our lore. So here we are back with issue 19 and it's lore time. I've also got issue 2 off to the side, ready for naming our parasite of Mortrex, as well as issue 4 for his title. So we've got 2 charts to roll on, plus his background in the issue. So before we dive in, let's take one last look at our model before he gets used in battle. And yeah, he does look really cool. Still a lot of detail to do. Not too sure how they're going to paint the growth at the bottom there. Website shows it as a darkish red. Maybe if we get corn red later on, it might be that colour. Or it might just get Caribou Crimson and that's it. Yeah, still looking really good. We'll see him in action very soon. Right, so we got some lore, we got some stories, and of course we got our naming ceremony for our parasite. So let's adjust the camera and we'll get right on with it. So skip the build and paint guide, and here we are at our first piece of new information. So this is all about the Great Crusade. The Great Crusade was led by the Emperor himself. The Great Crusade was a time of renewed hope and optimism for humanity, but that was not to last. Over 10,000 years ago, the Emperor conceived of a grand plan to unify the scattered tribes of humanity and to conquer the galaxy in his name. Vast fleets of starships and huge armies of space marines, adeptus custodes, and mortal soldiers were assembled for this purpose, supported by the Skitarii legions and the colossal titans of Mars. It was the single grandest undertaking mankind had ever known. For 2 centuries, these forces waged war in the Emperor's name, slaying his enemies without mercy and bringing thousands of planets into the nascent Imperium, reuniting previously lost human civilizations. The Great Crusade was a mission to assert the supremacy of humanity across the galaxy. Aliens and mutants were eradicated from the worlds where they were found so that they might be repopulated by Imperial colonists. Where distant human civilizations were discovered, they were brought into the fold of the Imperium, either through diplomacy or by strength of arms. All were forced to recognize the authority of the Emperor, and those who resisted were met by the full might of the Imperium's formidable military. Under the leadership of the Emperor and his genetic sons, the superhuman Primarchs, the Great Crusade expanded the bounds of human space to a greater extent than ever before or since. The technologically advanced Rangdar were exterminated in the galactic north through a series of brutal wars, while the verminous Hrud were driven from many worlds, or Space-Skaven. The Orc Empire of Urlak-Urg was crushed in the Ulanor system. It seemed that this was to be a golden age of humanity, and that none could challenge the Imperium's dominance. However, at the very height of the Crusade, the Emperor's great work was to be undone, not by any external force, but by treachery from within. An empire of broken dreams. The Great Crusade sought to establish a secular empire built upon science and reason. However, in the millennia since, these ideals have been lost, and the Imperium has descended into an age of fear, superstition, and ritual. During the Great Crusade, the Imperium's might was unparalleled. While our enemies still draw breath, there can be no peace among the stars. Here you see the Emperor rallying the Lunar Wolves and various other different legions of Space Marines as they take to war in a galaxy yet to be theirs. So there we go. I'm sure we'll learn how the end of this story goes when we start looking at the Heretic Astartes very soon. Moving on, we got our first of two short stories. And this one, The Enemy Within. So as I said at the start of the video, there is a bit of a content warning with this one. It does get a little graphic towards the end, so be warned if you are a younger viewer or have a very easily upset stomach. With that said, I'll put a timestamp if you want to skip it somewhere around here. And with that said, let's dive straight in. Beneath a bruised purple sky, the survivors of Decima Squad fell back across the barren landscape, seeking a more defensible position. The sun had not shone in weeks, blotted out by clouds of alien spores that seemed to grow ever denser. Progress was slow, and with each step, thick, acidic mud stuck to their boots. It was as if the whole landscape was being slowly digested. Where once trees had once been plentiful, now what remained was a foul-smelling vegetable slurry. The only things that grew here now were the tall spires of alien appearance. Cutter tried to avoid looking at the serrated forms, not daring to guess as to what their origin or purpose might be. Instead, she focused her gaze on the Imperial bunker that rose in the distance. Their salvation. The squad's progress was made slower by the weight of Jones, who leaned heavily on Cutter's shoulder as she helped him limp along. He had been wounded in a previous engagement, but she refused to leave him behind, as he'd insisted. He was, after all, the only reason she was still alive. She shuddered as she thought back to yesterday's events. They'd been out on patrol, scouting out the enemy's position for an artillery bombardment, when a dark shadow had suddenly swooped down upon them. Two of her squad mates had been ripped to shreds before they even knew what was happening. A huge bat-winged creature slashed and tore at them with its limbs and stabbed out with its long tail that ended in a vicious stinger. She remembered her limbs turning heavy as ferrocrete as she looked into its hideous, snarling face, convinced that this was the moment of her death. Then Jones, the brave fool, had rushed forward with his lasgun, firing point-blank into the creature and jabbing at it with his bayonet. Enraged, it had lashed out at him with its barbed tail, scoring a nasty wound into his abdomen before beating its leathery wings and flying away. "So, how's the hero of the hour doing?" she asked, masking her genuine concern with sarcasm. "It itches," Jones replied through gritted teeth. "It itches like you wouldn't believe." "Don't worry. Doc says it's just a flesh wound, no internal damage. You'll be playing Scrumble again in no time." Jones smiled, but Cutter could see that he was trying to hide the pain. The rest of the march was undertaken in near silence, as the exhausted remains of Decima squad made their way across the tainted wasteland to the bunker. Cutter noticed the uneasy glances to the sky. They were all fearful the winged nightmare would return. As they approached the bunker, everything was eerily quiet. A parasite of Mortrex haunts the skies above a shattered Imperial city, waiting for its chance to strike. Overturned ammo crates and spare kit littered the ground, and anything that could not be easily carried had been left behind. Overhead, a shadow flitted through the sky. "Enemy sighted!" yelled Cutter. "Wilkins, Jefferson, covering fire!" ordered Sergeant Wayland. "The rest of you get inside!" They opened fire, filling the air with distinctive crack of las bolts and the whine of recharging power cells. The creature above darted and dived, avoiding their shots before disappearing once more into the darkness. Still shouldering Jones's weight, she headed for the open door of the bunker, the rest of the squad following behind. When the last of Decima squad were inside, they sealed the heavy blast doors shut. Cutter eased Jones down onto the floor at the rear of the room, resting his back as comfortably as she could against the wall. His face was covered with sweat, and he was convulsing and muttering something to himself. "Sarge, Jones is acting strangely," she said. "He's feverish," Williams replied, kneeling down to inspect the injured guardsman. "The wound's probably just infected." Jones let out a long, agonized scream, and then they saw it. Something writhing and squirming beneath his flesh. Tiny claws burst out of his skin, tearing and rending at his body from the inside. Cutter felt bile rising in her throat as she saw the toothed maw chew its way out of his abdomen and flop onto the floor. "Emperor's throne!" she swore. Jones's body ruptured violently in a shower of gore and viscera, spattering the assembled soldiers with blood. Suddenly they were surrounded by newly spawned rippers, which left crimson trails in their wake as they skittered across the floor. One of them leapt up and burrowed itself into Wayland's leg, chewing through the flesh and bone in mere seconds. Cutter jumped back, drawing her sidearm and firing into the frenzied creatures emerging from the hollowed-out ruin that had once been Jones. But there were too many. Her comrades lay on the floor around her, thrashing and screaming as the ravenous monstrosity swarmed over them, devouring their still-living flesh. "Not like this," she thought, unslinging a bandolier of frag grenades. "If I'm going out, I'm taking you filth with me." Muttering a final prayer to the Emperor, she yanked out a pin from one grenade and dropped the bandolier into the open ammo crate. A second later, her world was filled with sound and fire, and then nothing. Sacrifice and duty, maxim of the 501st Gethsemane Rifles. So there we have it. Just because you think you're safe doesn't mean you are. So the effects of a vicious parasite of Mortrex and its barbed ovipositor. Poor Jones. If only he hadn't been so foolish as to charge the enemy. From foolish guardsmen to not so foolish space marines, this is Bonds of Honor Part 5. "Come inside now, through the gates. It is perhaps not what you might have expected, no. We are not ones for finery, but to me this bare place is one of the finest in the world. Here is my life and my memories, and now it will be yours too. Your triumphs and your burdens will be forever tied to this place, as though etched into its very walls. and your story will forever become entwined with that of the Silver Templars. Now, I hadn't finished my story, had I? Let us get back to it before I forget myself entirely and start again from the beginning. So there Sergeant Askerton and his squad were, leaving the tunnel, and behind them the Tyranid seemed to have backed off. But the Space Marines knew that something was stalking their steps, just out of sight, driven by some alien intelligence quite apart from that which was shown by the others. But I must be clear, even the most basic of Tyranids are not stupid, so much as they are mindless. By my reckoning, anyway. You wouldn't describe a rock as stupid, would you? Exactly. The Tyranids are more like that than they are like a stupid person. But of course, not everything that hunts a Space Marine is either stupid or mindless. Some things may be both capable and calculating, and it is always wise to consider that your enemy may have appraised your strength exactly, and may still feel equal to the fight. And it was this that had the squad concerned. The swift exit they were making is what we call a tactical withdrawal. Ha! I can see your distaste already. It must surprise you, now that you have come through the trials victorious, for not one of you would have passed thus far had you hesitated or shrunk from the challenges placed before you. Yet here I tell you of a squad of our best Space Marines, fully trained and battle-hardened, led by one of our finest, Sergeant Askerton, and they had turned in the face of the foe. How can this be? Well, we must fight not for ourselves, but for our brothers, our commanders, and our Emperor. Our pride and our desires cannot always be paramount, and we must satisfy them when the fighting is done. Remember, I told you of the sergeant's great loss, his rifle, Judgment, that was torn from his hand. Well, nothing would have pleased him more than to have already abandoned this fight and be searching for his lost companion. But he stuck to his duty against his own desires. That is one of many things that made him a great man. So do not take it lightly when I tell you that he turned away from the fight. That was no moment of weakness. In fact, for any of them to turn away was not what they desired at all. Nothing would have pleased them more than to empty every last bolt into the squirming masses, and then to rip and tear with knives and even their hands until not one of them stood alive. No, the reason they turned was to bring even greater wrath down on the foe, by their hands and by their brothers in the rest of the chapter. Do not forget, those of you who arise as Silver Templars and join us on the field, that you are not alone. You may fight as one man, but you are part of your squad, and that squad may fight as a small band of heroes, but it is part of a company. And so, as the squad reached the mouth of the tunnel, they were finally able to vox communication, alerting their brothers to the threat. The floor of the tunnel seemed to writhe and move. All manner of tyrannies swarmed towards the Silver Templars. They were in luck that day, for who should respond but a nearby Infernus squad? You will never have seen anything like it, and my heart gladdens for you that you will one day stand near one in battle for the first time. You will never forget it. As the squad left the tunnels, they turned back to face the entrance. The Infernus squad strode forward, level with Sergeant Askerton and the others. Only half a dozen men, but so perfectly suited to this task that they had the strength of a whole army. One by one, their pilot lights on the front of their pyroblasters lit, a faint blue glow that reflected off the heat-tarnished metal. A single Infernus Marine strode forward, then he fired his weapon. The force of the blast pressed him back, but he held firm as fuel shot out of the barrel, over the pilot light and into the tunnel. A primal roar rent the air as a huge gout of flame spewed from the weapon. Great clouds of caustic black smoke rose up from the stream of liquid fire, and from the now blazing tunnel came a noise like an insectile scream. You see, no matter how great your cunning and intelligence, it all comes to naught when you're set on fire. Out poured the Tyranids, some aflame, some spared as the bodies of their fellows took the brunt. The remaining Infernus Marines unleashed jets of fire, and Sergeant Askerton and his squad fired their bolters again and again into the horde. Wave after wave came, and so great was the conflagration that even through their ceramite armor, the Space Marines felt the searing heat. But eventually, all was still. No more Tyranids came from the mouth of the tunnel. No movement was sighted. The bodies in front of them lay still, sizzling gently, all life having left them. And let that be a lesson to you, your first battle lesson, if you like. If an enemy turns and runs, that is not surrender. They may be fleeing before you in desperate fear for their lives, or they may be running for cover, only to turn and fire on you once they are in a more advantageous position. There is no dishonor in firing on a fleeing foe, and you would be well to exact the Emperor's wrath on every last one. They are nothing to us, who are pure of heart, and we fell them without thought. But I'm getting away with myself there. There will be plenty of time to talk of battle as you begin your transformation. You will be well enough drilled that a few words from an old man will make little difference to your skills. What I hope I can give you is a sense of right. For the sergeant is your perfect example. He risked shame and loss to save his brother Mectras, yet he bore the loss with dignity. He turns not from his duty, and he risked all to take the fight to the foe. But he was not foolhardy nor prideful, and he withdrew to his advantage, saving all of his squad and destroying the enemy utterly and bringing glory to his company. And with that duty done, and most excellently, he was finally able to give some thought to recovering his missing rifle. Ultima Founding. A founding is an event in which new chapters of Space Marines are created. The most recent is the Ultima Founding. Many new chapters were created during the events of the Indomitus Crusade, both to support the Crusade and to carry out other duties across the Imperium. The Silver Templars are one of the many new chapters that were created during this time. And there we have it, the end, quite possibly, of Sergeant Askerton's story. We are sure to have more Silver Templar stuff in the near future. But yeah, that's a really good short story, and if read all together, would make a quite nice little story to listen to. I don't think my voice could hold up reading all 5 in a row, though. Especially doing the grizzled veteran voice that I was doing throughout, but still, really cool. Right, one last thing before the end of the video, let's name our Parasite of Mortrex. So first off, a little bit about these beasts. Parasites of Mortrex are horrific predators. They are as swift and cunning as any tyrant, but it is their unique biological weaponry that makes them so feared. Parasites of Mortrex will infest their enemies with Ripper swarms, causing even the most stalwart warriors to be devoured from within. Right, so I've got a pen, a dice, something to lean on, and my 2 issues for the tables. So part 1 of its name is row 2, column 6, The Hungering. Ooh, okay. And the second part is 3 followed by 6 again. The Hungering Dread. Okay, that's pretty cool. I think that's the best name we've had so far. And to give it its title in issue 4, so we got six, so the Living Tide. A moniker most likely given to its birthed Ripper Swarms more than itself, but still pretty cool. I do. Back when the Parasite of Mortrex was first introduced to 40k lore, which I can remember, there was only the one Parasite of Mortrex, and it was on the planet of Mortrex. They've simply changed the law now that it's an adaptation that's been accepted into the wider Hive Fleet. So we've got a little background table to roll on. What do we get? Another 5 or 6. So the Parasite focuses on infesting enemy commanders with slow-growing Rippers that emerge at the worst possible moment. Yep, okay. That suits. So we have built, we have painted, and next video we will be playing. So there we go. Finally then, we have his datasheet to have a quick look at. So add this datasheet to your collection of Tyranid datasheets. This datasheet contains all the information you need to use the Parasite of Mortrex in battle. If you need a reminder of how the datasheets work, check the information, or what any of the information means, revisit the article using datasheets in A Introduction 4. So what do we have? We have a movement of 12, tough 5, 4+ save, 5 wounds, leadership 8, objective control 1. It has the Barbed Ovipositor, so anti-infantry 3+, extra attacks, does a single attack, 2+ to hit, 3+ to strength 3, -2, 3 damage, so pretty lethal. And it has the Clawed Limbs, so 6 attacks, 2+, strength 5, -1 and 1 damage. So to include this in your combat patrol, in games where you're using the Tyranid's combat patrol, the Varden Gas Swarm, you may, before selecting enhancements, remove the Barbed Gaunts from your army and replace them with a Parasite of Mortrex. So he has Deep Strike, he's a lone operative, and he has Stealth, so it's kind of hard to hit him, which makes up for the low save at least. He's a Synapse faction and has Shadow in the Warp. It has Itches. At the start of the fight phase, select an enemy unit within engagement range. That enemy must take a Battle Shock test. And it's just a single model, so there we have it. So yeah, pretty cool. So up next we have one little play article to look at, which is a little bit of a tactica on how to use the Parasite of Mortrex. But that's it for this issue. So we'll bring him in again. And that is the end of our lore for issue 19. So 2 lovely short stories, nice little bit of information about the Great Crusade, and we've named our Parasite of Mortrex ready to add to our Tyranid force. So up next, as I said, we have that little Tactica readout, and we have our latest mission in which we get to field this guy. So I'm looking forward to trying him out. And I hope you'll join me for the next episode of Combat Patrol Carnage. So until then, thank you for watching, and goodbye.